All right. Thanks everyone for starting to put your name and major in the chat. Really appreciate it. I think we can go ahead and get started, so I'll pass it over to Eric.
Awesome. And thank you, everyone, and welcome to February's edition of the Career Speaker Series. We did, well, kind of shoot a little ahead of the Women in STEM month, which I believe starts in March. But today I'm joined by Caitlin Mildy and Grace Agnello, who will give this opportunity to talk a little bit more about their experiences as early career professionals in both energy and sustainability fields. For those of you that are new joining us, traditionally what we'll do is we'll go through a bit of an introduction for our panelists, an opportunity for them to talk about their role, job description, their experiences, as well as their understanding of sustainability at their company, their potential career paths, internships, just a little bit more background on themselves. And then with that, we'll open it up for Q&A between myself, where I'll pose some questions, throw them their way, and they'll answer to the group. And towards the end, we'll allocate about 10 to 15 minutes for a Q&A with students. So as we go through this, if you have any pressing questions that jump out, either feel free to take yourself off a mic or go ahead and put that into the chat, and we can save those questions towards the end. But without further ado, I'd like to pass it off to my panelists, and if you guys can just give me a brief rundown on your background, educational experiences, just a little bit more information on what it is you all do.
Okay, I'll go first. My name's Caitlin Mildy, and to address the elephant in the room, Eric is my older brother. So you probably noticed our last names are the same. We don't have a very common last name, but yeah. So I got my undergraduate degree from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte in mechanical engineering. I did a concentration in energy, and then I also have a minor in math. And then I actually recently just graduated from NC State's master's program with a mechanical engineering degree in that as well. So I actually just graduated in December. So I work for Westinghouse Electric Company, which is a nuclear engineering company.
Oh, Caitlin, I think you muted yourself. We're ironing out the kinks.
Okay. I see that it keeps like muting me without my knowledge. Okay.
That was my bad. Sorry, I was trying to mute someone else. My bad.
Okay, I don't know where I left off, but yeah, my master's degree is in mechanical engineering at NC State. I just graduated in December, and I work for Westinghouse Electric Company, which is a nuclear engineering company. So that's a little bit about me.
All right, my name is Grace Agnello, and I just graduated last May from CNR with a BS in Natural Resources with a concentration in policy, and I also did the minor in Renewable Energy Assessment. I'm a development analyst at Deriva Energy, which is a portfolio company of Brookfield Renewable. We're a developer and IPP that develops, owns, and operates renewable energy sites. Did have a few internships in the energy industry as well as the sustainability industry, but my role is mostly project development, management, and coordination with stakeholders.
Oh, wonderful. And thank you both. Just for my information and for some of us that are newer to their time at NC State, Grace, could you explain what CNR stands for?
Yes, the College of Natural Resources.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just as a show of hands from folks in the chat, how many of us are either master's students or undergraduate students? So for the first few seconds, can we get hands up for undergraduate students, just to give us an idea of how many of us there are? Awesome. And just as a show of hands for graduate students. Awesome. I really appreciate it. This is just some information for myself, as well as just to help fill folks in. I know that when I first started at university, there were all these acronyms in colleges that I wasn't particularly familiar with, and sometimes it hurts to ask questions, or you're shy to ask those sorts of questions. So as we go through this conversation, we'll find that sustainability and working within either the energy or other semi-environmental sectors have pretty wide wide paths and winding paths, and can be quite an interesting journey for a lot of us. But Grace and Caitlin, I really appreciate it. And as we go forward, I'll just pose a couple of questions. Whoever feels comfortable answering, feel free, and we will we'll see where it takes us. So you both have experience either in renewable or energy. And a big question I have is, what was your very first experience working at an organization like that? Was it with, a major internship or some interesting projects? And how did you start that? And how did you find that role?
Yeah, I can start. I think for me, I interned with Westinghouse before I started full time. So it was not my first internship. I had interned at a very different company previously, which was more manufacturing. But after that internship, I was like, I want to try something in energy. I have this energy concentration. And at UNC Charlotte, that concentration is really just a couple of classes. It's like you just specialize in a certain area. So it's a couple extra classes in this elective like grouping. So I wanted to try something that was more related to that energy concentration. So um, I was looking for those types of internships. I got my internship at Westinghouse, and then that's where I've been for the last 5 years. And we are a nuclear engineering company, so we design, build, service nuclear power plants all over the US, Canada, and in Europe, even out in Asia as well. So my first experience was that internship. And it was the thing about nuclear in general, but in particular, like nuclear power plants, is that so much of the plant is more than just nuclear. There's a lot of, I don't know if anybody in here is an engineer but there's a lot of piping, there's a lot of equipment, pumps, feed water heaters, all kinds of things that are all considered mechanical components. So when we think about energy and we think about like nuclear energy specifically, there's so much that goes into it that's not just nuclear, right? Like that's one small part of how the power is being created. And that's something as an intern that I had to learn. And, eventually as a full-time employee that, I might not be able to see it every single day, what impact I'm making on, in my job, in my company. But then you see the big picture and you're like, wow, like I did this little piece of it and it would not have been able, the plant would not be able to run without this piece that I know everything about. So.
Yeah, pretty similar to Caitlin. I had an internship with Deriva Energy, the company I'm currently with. So had a summer internship. I was a development intern on the same team that I'm currently full-time on, and I just found that through the company website and had to do a few rounds of interviews and a few projects related to renewable energy during that process. But think that was my first kind of real experience in energy. Of course, I had the class experience from my minor, but first experience kind of in the energy realm was that internship, and that was mostly focused on prospecting, so finding new greenfield sites for renewable energy. And Deriva Energy does utility scale wind, solar, standalone storage, as well as hybrid projects. So for my internship, I was focusing on solar prospecting and just managing those projects until they were handed off to a mid-stage developer, as well as some other research and just state strategy for prospecting efforts.
Awesome. And I just as a follow-up question, you both mentioned getting internships at an early stage, either coming out of your undergrad or during your undergrad. Did you find strategies that were particularly helpful to finding those sorts of positions? And if so, what were they?
Yeah, I think for me, I just had a list of companies that I was interested in, and when I applied, my company was actually Duke Energy. So I knew that was kind of a target for me, wanting to dip my feet in the energy industry, and I just went on their website and applied from there, and I did a lot of just personal research to kind of see what kind of company I was most interested in working for.
I can't lie, I think I'm a really bad person to answer this question because I think my internship kind of fell into my lap. Like I mentioned earlier, like I had a previous internship that wasn't related to energy, and I realized I didn't really like that environment and I wanted to try something new. So I think I probably was looking on Indeed. I know Westinghouse has a really good relationship with UNC Charlotte because they're local. So they were at all the career fairs. So I think if I was to tell my younger self something, I would say go to those career fairs, do your research on, the different companies, like Grace said, and make a short list of ones that you really want to talk to, because being able to talk to those representatives at career fairs in person makes a huge difference when you're trying to stand out. Because companies get thousands of applications every year, and so if you want to stand out, make a personal connection with somebody that works there. I've been to these career fairs on the employer side, and things that stand out to us are, we get handed a resume and we write on the resume what we think of the conversation that we had with that student, if we think they'd be a good fit. And that's all from like a very split second introduction to them. So, again, going to these career fairs prepared, doing your research, having things that you want to talk to those representatives about. I think all these things make a huge difference when you're trying to break into a field as specific as energy.
Oh, wonderful. When you both have attended any kind of applicant interview or a career fair for your positions, was there any were there any traits for potential applicants that jumped out? And if so, what were they? And on the other end of that, what do you see as a common mistake some students make in trying to pursue those positions?
I know from a Westinghouse perspective, we definitely are looking for, people that they might have 4.0 GPA, but what we're really looking for is someone who has a good balance of a decent GPA and also having the ability to learn quickly, um, being able to be a team player. One of the things we do as fluid engineers is we have to learn systems and how they work overall and how they impact each other. So being able to pick up on things very quickly, or, the willingness to learn new things is really important, because that can't always be taught. That's something that you just kind of have personality wise. And especially being an entry level employee, you're not expected to know everything there is to know about like nuclear energy or any other type of energy. They just want you to be able to learn that stuff quickly, and be able to take feedback from people, be able to communicate with your managers. So all of these like soft skills that are super important, and the way to show that on your resume would be being involved in organizations and being the leader of these organizations. For example, like I was not super involved in engineering organizations on campus, but I was really involved in on-campus jobs. I was the president of our club lacrosse team, and these are all things that are not directly related to my career as an engineer, but they kind of showed a little bit about my personality and the type of person that I was, the type of worker I was going to be. So those type of things stand out. Leadership positions, having interest in things outside of just your academic space, showing that you're a person, you're not just like someone who goes to class and goes home, because all these things impact your work environment, your community there. So that would be my 2 cents.
I think something that I always look for is someone who has demonstrated that they're able to be a self-starter, because a lot of the work that we have our interns do or my team does is pretty independent, and you are starting projects on your own. You're responsible for performing project due diligence as well as coordinating with internal and external parties, and just looking for someone who is super passionate and interested in the industry and just wants to get started. I think that the renewable energy industry is always changing. There's always something new coming up, especially now with data centers and AI. And we really enjoy having interns that are able to bring new ideas and are also interested in doing some research on different strategies that the company can implement as the industry is ever changing. Um, I'm not sure about a common mistake. I think I agree with Caitlin. We like to see applicants that are really well-rounded, and of course, it can be difficult to get specific experience in the industry. I don't think that you necessarily need a prior internship in renewable energy, but definitely having demonstrated some interest, or maybe you did research in undergrad or graduate programs, or different like on-campus experiences, especially clubs if you're super involved in a club that would also definitely stand out to us. And I think also just making sure that you fully understand the scope of the position that you're applying to. I think that the industry can be so confusing and sometimes titles in one company are different than another company, but just making sure like going into the interview you have questions prepared and you really kind of know what the company stands for and what the team does on a day-to-day.
I will say a quick answer to something that is like a negative during interviews is when we ask if you have questions and you don't have anything to say. Even if it's a question that you have to make up on the spot, like say something, because saying nothing implies that you are not that interested in the company, or maybe you think that you know everything you need to know about the company. So that's like a really easy, quick thing that you can do to improve your chances.
Oh, and I really appreciate the responses. Just as a little add-on to recommendations, um, please feel free to take advantage of the Career Development Center through NC State. It has wonderful resources to just take advantage of for those that are looking for employment or resume advice. And I can't speak highly enough about those centers from either university. But Grace, you said something that stuck out to me in regards to understanding the scope of a role. When you both had entered into your respective roles, were there any facts or pieces of that job position that might have surprised you compared to what you would have expected as a student?
I think the one thing that surprised me immediately was the lifetime of a project. So I thought that I could come develop a project and watch it get built, which I'm not sure if anyone at my company, unless they've been there for 30 plus years, has necessarily seen. Just because a project makes it past the development term, which could be up to 10 years, doesn't mean that it'll necessarily make it to construction and then eventually operate power. So that was something that I was really blindsided by, just not knowing how long the processes really take.
Yeah, that's a really good example. Especially nuclear projects are notoriously like long lasting. So yeah. Um, I think one that I wasn't expecting is that, I mean, people say this all the time, but truly every day you're learning something new. And in the nuclear space, if one of my roles is working on plants that are already operating, and a lot of times we are servicing these plants, providing modifications, you know, plants are trying to be more efficient, all that stuff. So um, every plant is the same, but also very different, and dealing with different companies and different personalities. And, you're dealing with a lot of things that are like a lot of these calculations that I'm working with are like much older than I am. And it's just interesting to see, you know, how things have changed from, back when these plants were built in like the 1980s to now, and kind of seeing like the growth of nuclear energy in particular. They had a really big growth period where they were building a bunch of plants in the 1980s, and then they stopped building plants. Then they tried to start building plants again. Then the recession happened in 2008, so they stopped again, and then they're starting back up. So it's like some of the people that I work with have been in the industry through all of that, from like all these different highs and lows of the industry. So it's really interesting to see like the different types of personalities you get introduced to, but also like how technology changes, how long, like Grace was saying, these projects can last. So all of these things were not what I was expecting when I entered into the industry.
It's always great to just hear insights about expectations versus reality in a lot of work scenarios. But Caitlin, you had mentioned just some differences in personalities and the types of people that you work with. In both of your experiences, how much of the work that you do day to day is collaborative and how much of it is independent?
For me as an engineer, I basically everything I do is collaborative. I mean, and while I am 4 years out from my undergraduate degree, I still am considered a very like novice engineer compared to, like I said, these people that have been working longer than I've been alive. So where there's always something new to learn from other people. Um, there is a lot of independent work, but there's always like you're always going to run into something where you have questions and you have to go ask somebody else, or sometimes like your the projects you're working on, your roles interface with other people, and you're having to ask them questions, they ask you questions, that kind of thing. But yeah, I would say almost, I mean, I'm talking to people every single day, trying to get down to the bottom of a problem that we have. And I would think that's pretty typical for most careers.
I would say for my role, developing the projects starts out pretty independent, where the analyst or associate is able to do a good amount of due diligence at the beginning of the project. And then as it progresses, you kind of start collaborating a little bit more with different teams. So collaborate with people on my team, the development team specifically. And then I also work with people on our environmental team, our policy team, our engineering, construction, transmission, interconnection, a lot of different subject matter experts just to get buy-in about the project and do more analysis to see if we want to push the project forward. And I also collaborate with external parties. So we have land agents that reach out to our landowners at our prospective sites, and I'll collaborate with them to kind of try to advance that land site control and meet with landowners and have those conversations, and then external consultants as well, just doing different like geotech studies or hydrology and things like that. So I think my role is also a pretty good mix. I think it starts out independent, and then as the ball starts rolling, you realize that you need a lot more assistance or buy-in from other parties, and then it gets pretty crowded. So.
And in your roles, do you find that you're having to ask just a decent amount of questions? And I think one of you had brought up being an advocate for learning, but do you find that comes up a lot?
I find that I ask a lot of questions, especially we have technology specific teams. So I work in all three technologies, but if I'm working on a storage project in particular, I will definitely have a lot of questions for the developer that only works on storage because they just have a wealth of knowledge in that exact technology. And then, of course, I always like to ask questions to people on my team who have been doing the role for longer than me and might have other resources that I'm able to utilize.
Yeah, I ask questions all the time, all every day, all day. I think so much. I don't know if it's specific to like engineering, but there's just so much to know. And like I said, every plan is a little bit different, so you're always going to be deferring to someone who knows more, which is why having mentors and being a mentor to other people is super important because when you start off in your new career, your first day, like obviously you don't know anything really. And every day you learn a little bit more. So having somebody that can very easily ask questions to without judgment is important. And I think I mean, I've learned so much more from having mentors who want to be mentors and want to answer your questions compared to having mentors that do not want to answer your questions. Because sometimes you don't want to keep bugging someone if it feels like they don't want that. So having a mentor that like is very willing to be there, no question is a dumb question. Even if it is a dumb question, it's okay. We're all a little dumb, like everybody's gonna, you'll have to start somewhere. I think that makes a huge impact on how much you can learn and how quickly.
I really appreciate both of your insights on that. But over the course of our conversation, I've kind of noticed a through line from both of you, um, being age, either just being early in your career versus working with folks that have been in the industry for decades, depending. Have there been situations where you've run into conflict with that, and how did you navigate those differences?
I don't think that I have specifically run into conflict with that, especially with the storage side. It just that technology hasn't been around for very long, so there's only so many people that even have that kind of experience. But I have seen developers, mid-stage developers, kind of getting in conflicts with vice presidents or leadership about strategy and projects. I think sometimes there are like corporate guidelines for projects, and you have to check every single box, but developing the project, the timeline is very important, and sometimes you have to execute a project before or after maybe the company expected you to. So definitely seen some arguments of I've been developing projects for 20 years. I know this is a good project. And then on the other hand, someone saying, well, the environmental team says this isn't a good project. So, and then the argument goes back to, well, there's no good projects anymore. All the land is taken up, and it's just a whole brawl. So definitely seen that, but haven't necessarily experienced that personally.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I don't think I always come into it expecting that, I'm probably going to know something that somebody else doesn't know. Somebody else is going to know something that I don't know. So I think it really, like, if your personality is cool with accepting criticism, then you probably, you'll probably see things that you might be an issue to some people, but might not be an issue to you. There's definitely big, strong personalities who think that they're right 100% of the time, regardless of, how old they are, how much experience they have. But I would say for the most part, I haven't experienced anybody that was, super problematic. Um, Sometimes though, I do feel like being, the longer you're in any role, there's more that's expected of you. So sometimes it can be hard to always be like, sometimes it feels like you always have to know what's going on, be on your A game. And sometimes and the longer you get into the industry, it's harder to feel okay with like not knowing things. Uh, when you start out, it's easy because you're like, well, I don't know anything, right? But then the longer you're here, you're like, okay, now I'm expected to meet a certain expectation and to know all these things. And sometimes like that's an internal thing that I struggle with. It's not necessarily something that I hear from anybody else, but sometimes you look at people who have been working for like 40 years and you're like, wow, they're so confident in the knowledge that they have. They're able to clearly communicate that. And sometimes it's like hard to compare yourself to them because you're like, wow, I want to be like them. I feel like I should be there now. But you have to accept that, they've been working for like 10 times as long as I have. So I will get there one day. Um, but I wouldn't say I had any conflict with anyone based on age or experience. I would more say it's like internal things that I strive to do, and sometimes when I don't meet those expectations, you know, that's where I feel it.
No, absolutely. In a lot of roles, any amount of work experience, even if you're starting or further along, when you run into folks that have higher degrees of experience, it can be daunting and sometimes difficult to ask questions or knowing where to start with some people. So it's always appreciated to get to ask and see what others' experiences are like in that regard. But as a just as a general question, um, working within the energy and renewable space, there's a lot of policy changes. There's business interests and conflict, as well as trying to do right, both in the environment and in a community. And my question, and this is probably a bigger question, but how do you balance those expectations with growing in that role, as well as just dealing with potential burnout?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, In regards to the policy side, I definitely think it's hard when the policy is ever changing, especially if it's state specific or county specific. So I think it's always good to rely on local council and general council to advise on the general policy in the area and if they're open to renewables development or not. And just staying up to date on industry news. I have a subscription to New Project Media, which I've really enjoyed. They publish a lot of like proprietary and confidential news about the industry as well. So I think it's really worth it to have membership to that. A lot about policy and how other companies are kind of pushing forward their projects, even right now when permitting is kind of difficult. So I think that's always good to look into podcasts or other industry news to stay up to date. And then, of course, we have a internal policy and environmental permitting team that we will consult for projects. So always like to ask questions and kind of get their feedback before getting in too deep with any projects.
No, I appreciate the answer. It was a bit of a loaded question, but I was just curious on, there's a lot of moving pieces in these industries respectively, and that can, well, potentially put up walls or obstacles that are difficult to navigate, especially early in a position. But I think you brought up an interesting point, Grace, about just industry involvement, understanding updates in, either professional organizations or projects up on the horizon. And do you feel that there was value to be, valued for being involved in those professional organizations and those networking opportunities? And if so, do you have some recommendations? And this question would go out to both of you.
Yeah, definitely. I think that there's a lot of value in kind of getting to know colleagues or other people working in the industry, especially if you attend conferences. So I went to a really great conference a few months ago called RISE, which is Women in Renewable Industries and Sustainable Energy. They had a lot of great sessions just about like navigating the industry specific to 2025, 2026, and breakout sessions where everyone got to discuss like what their company is doing. And that was really interesting. Also attended RE Plus, which is a really large clean energy conference. And they always kind of like to specialize in what's new and what's upcoming in the industry. So got to learn a lot there, meet a lot of other professionals in the industry. And then just besides that, I think staying up to date with general news, there's a lot of different subscriptions, like New Project Media is one of them, but there's other ones that are market specific or policy specific that people are signed up to. And sometimes at my company, if we come across an interesting article, we just send it to the whole team and just see where it takes us. So also love to share it just with my colleagues.
Yeah, at my company, we are very involved in two different nuclear specific organizations. One is called North American Young Generation in Nuclear, and that one is focused around young people in the nuclear industry, which is really great because you get to meet. It's very tight knit, I would say. We travel to conferences every year, but we also do things like volunteer together. We do public outreach. Um, but one of the great things is that we are introduced to not only, engineering firms, but also, you know, the utility plants that, like for instance, Duke Energy, they're our local one, and they own the plants that we service. So it's good to have that relationship with, the client when you're this new into your career, being able to be like, oh, I know someone personally that works at this company, and I have an inside scoop on what's going on over there. So that's always really great. We have another organization we're involved in called Women in Nuclear. So that one obviously is catered towards the women in the nuclear industry. But that one's really amazing too because we are in nuclear, it is a male dominated field. So having, you know, to be able to connect in that way with other women is really amazing. Um, because when, you know, there's there are engineer and I get caught up in the engineering thing because my whole company, at least out of my office, they're all engineers. So I don't really get to interact with people that are part of our business unit or part of sales. So when I go to these conferences, I meet people from other companies, but also from my own company from a different location that do a completely different thing that I didn't even know our company was involved in. And that's amazing because it's another part of the nuclear industry that I don't get to see day to day because my world is so centered on one thing. Um, Another organization I'm not a part of, but trying to dip my toes into is called Women's Energy Network. So obviously that's more general for women in all of the energy industries. Um, so I know like in Charlotte they have a local chapter. So I don't know if Raleigh has one, but it'd be worth looking into. They do very similar things, volunteer events. They do social events like networking. I think they have conferences. So that one would be really good for you all to get involved into.
Thank you. When it comes to conferences and professional organizations, they're always very specific, and sometimes it's hard to know which ones are best to be tapped into. In both of your experiences, were these organizations that came recommended from a mentor at your company, or, well, effectively, how did you find them?
For me, it was very easy. I've had the same manager since I was an intern, and she's been both my manager and my mentor. And was involved in it. Our company sponsors, like they financially sponsor us to attend events, to plan our own events, involved in these organizations. So we have a lot of company backing, and that's super amazing. For what I've been to conferences that were not sponsored by my company, but a lot of the universities will have like a free or very low cost conference that you can attend. I got very lucky a couple years ago. UNC Charlotte did a um, I can't remember. I think it was called Clean Energy Conference, and it was hosted on campus. It was free to attend. And I took the day off of work and I was a Friday. I just went. And I networked on my own outside of my company. And it was amazing. That's how I learned about this other organization, the Women's Energy Network. And I realized like there's a whole other side to the energy industry. Like I said, I get very like pigeonhole, like, streamlined into this one in, nuclear energy. But there's so much else out there.
Oh no, Kevin, I believe you're muted again.
I don't know how this keeps happening. Anyways, yeah, I lost my train of thought. But yeah, the conferences, sometimes the companies sponsor them, sometimes they don't. Sometimes you gotta pay a little bit out of pocket to participate in them. But I would start by following other people who, on LinkedIn and stuff that are involved in the industry. And from there, you'll be able to see them attending events, hopefully, and you'll be able to look into them, know that they exist. Um, but there's usually something going around somewhere, and it might take a little bit. You might have to drive, you might have to pay a little bit out of pocket, but if you can get your company to sponsor it, that is like the ultimate goal. Sometimes it's hard to achieve, but it it helps to start the conversation. And if you're going to attend these conferences on your own dime, I recommend telling your manager or your supervisor that you're going to be doing that. Because even if they're not sponsoring it, they're going to see that you're going, and maybe they'll offer to pay for it the next year. So.
I think it's a great tip to follow other people on LinkedIn and just kind of see what conferences or organizations they're interested in. For me personally, all of the conferences and organizations I'm a part of came recommended from coworkers. So the first conference that I went to with my company, I think we had 40 people from my company going, so it was a big year. We all decided that we hadn't been to that RE Plus conference in a long time, so it was kind of a big group event. And then also the Rise conference that I went to came recommended from a coworker who was part of the organization at her previous company. So our company sent a group of us to that. And then we also attend the ACP conferences, which is American Clean Power. They have some permitting and siting conferences every year. And I think that, usually we kind of just talk amongst each other and pick out a few that we're most interested in for the year, but we usually go to the same ones every year.
No, thank you both. When I was getting into industry and trying to navigate all of those professional organizations and conferences, it can be complicated. And it's refreshing and comforting to hear that in these instances, you guys are taking advantage of the people around you, asking them questions, seeing where they're going, and seeing if they have recommendations to help. And those really do make a difference when you're building out this network, especially in a professional sense. Um, and I know we're getting close to our Q&A session with some of our guests, but I always like to ask something a little bit off the beaten path. But for both of you, you're early in your careers, navigating the avenues of where to go. What's next for you both? Either in the next 5 years, even the next year.
That is a very difficult question to answer. Um, I don't know. As an engineer, my next step, because I just graduated from grad school, my next step is the professional engineering exam. Then I'll be a fully licensed engineer, and I could do that's it's valuable in our industry, and I can take that with me wherever I go. So that's the goal right now. The next like 5 years, I don't know. I recently was promoted to senior engineer, which is the third level up. So, well, not counting internship, but third level up full time. Um, so I'm probably going to still be a senior engineer in that amount of time. Maybe I'll be moving up to the next level. Um, but yeah, that's I'll probably still be, if not at my current company, then I can't imagine doing anything much different. I'm very happy with what I'm doing. So yeah, I'm it's kind of a boring answer, sorry.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think for me, not in a year or maybe 5 years. I'd like to transition to working on a technology specific team that focuses on mid to late stage development. Where I sit right now, I focus more on the early to mid stage. So after we submit the project to the interconnection queue, it's handed off to the next team, which is technology specific. So I've been really interested in wind recently as well as the standalone storage. So want to keep working on a lot of those projects and just see where that takes me. And hopefully I'll land on one of those technology teams and kind of become like more of an expert in one technology and grow with those projects and see how they go as time progresses.
I know it was a loaded question to ask, and there's a lot of different implications, but especially at these stages, it's always interesting to get to hear what you see yourselves doing in the near future and what that might look like. Are there any avenues of particular interest? I know, Grace, you had listed some technology that you were finding interesting, but is there any other avenues that are kind of drawing your attention as well?
I think also co-locating with data centers is something that's really interesting to me. Data centers are going to be developed whether we like it or not, so it may as well force them to purchase power from a solar farm or wind farm. I think origination is also kind of an interesting aspect of the industry. How do we market our projects and how do we sell them? And that kind of goes along with the data center development and just like having relationships with companies that are developing data centers so that we can market our projects to them and eventually we can have a relationship where they're able to tell us where they're going to develop a data center and then we can develop, a wind or solar site right next to them and co-locate and we have offtake right next door, which is great for both parties.
Yeah, our company does a lot of small projects in conjunction with our main focus. So like we do servicing of plants, but we also build full scale nuclear power plants. And then we also have smaller projects where we are currently designing different types of smaller reactors. So I've had very small roles in some of those projects, but I think if there was something that I would like to try differently in the next couple of years, it would to be to get onto one of those smaller reactor projects because they're first of their kind and it's all new technology. So it would be cool to be a part of that and to, you know, be able to say like, hey, I got to do something on this project that was really groundbreaking and was a huge historic milestone. So something like that. We also do energy storage as well at our company, but it's a tiny, tiny group that works on that. But yeah, just trying out different sides of engineering and what we have to offer would be nice. Just any way to, lock in what exactly I like to do and what I see myself doing for the rest of my life. So
Thank you both. This is the period during the Career Speaker Series where we'll pass it off to our guests and listeners. If you guys have any pressing questions, either feel free to take yourselves off of mute now or post them in the chat, and we'll just try our best to answer.
I can start us out while people are typing in the chat. But from my perspective, as you know, a staff person at NC State, we're currently um, in the process of scaling a new sustainability career development program for students to kind of help them like catalog all the activities that they're doing across campus and beyond related to sustainability. And as we're scaling this program, we're thinking a lot about, what are the key skills students need when they leave the university in order to be successful in industry. And so I'm just curious, are there any like key skills you wish you had developed during your time at NC State that either kind of on the staff and faculty side we could do a better job of, or just kind of on the student end they could be more aware of taking opportunities that align with those skills?
I would say I did the online master's program, so I was never in person at NC State. But from my perspective, um, I would love to have seen my classes have been more energy industry focused. And I know that's pretty specific to like the engineering department and all of that. And I know there is a nuclear engineering degree program, but being able to like intermingle with some of those classes would have been nice. I do think because I was online, I was limited in the number of classes that I was allowed to take. So maybe that could be an option. Or, I don't remember ever really getting emails about anything really like energy related or energy organizations. And again, I was online, so maybe I was just, not the target audience. But yeah, that would be my suggestion was to have been able to have more opportunities to meet people within the energy industry who either were in the engineering department or any of the other departments that intermingle.
Well, first off, I like that idea a lot. I think that sounds like a really interesting program for students. I definitely would have liked that during my time, so I think that's great. Um, I think for me, I did do the renewable energy assessment minor, and I actually left this review on one class that I wish that it was more tailored towards utility scale development because the reality is that if you're going to graduate and work in the industry, if you're working for a developer, an independent power producer, or a utility, you're most likely working on utility scale projects. I didn't have a lot of insight into what went into utility scale project because the minor classes were mostly focused on commercial and some residential as well. So really just wish that there was a little bit more background, maybe classes or different clubs that were focused more on kind of like a corporate or utility scale side of renewable energy. I think that would be helpful to a lot of students who are interested in just learning about the industry or who want a full-time position upon their graduation as well.
Thank you both. So I'm hearing more like real industry, like mirroring within your coursework, I think, which I think there's more of a push now at NC State for that, as you're seeing probably more faculty that have like more industry experience. But I definitely think we're still working as a university on that. And there's also more of a push now for high impact experiences in the classroom and also as part of co-curricular programming. So, other question, folks, don't be shy. You have two NC State alumni that have been in your shoes. Oh, looks like we have a question.
What's been the most rewarding part of your current role? And that was asked by Catherine.
I think for me, the most rewarding part is just knowing that I am helping to develop these projects that are going to provide renewable energy to the grid to help stabilize the grid in a time where energy is not always guaranteed for everyone, and there's a lot of other energy sources that are not renewable and harm the environment. And I just went into the field because I love the environment and I'm really passionate about sustainability. And in the 7 months that I've been full time, I've had two wind projects that I prospected get signed. So one of those will be a 300 megawatt and the other one will be 400 megawatts. So 700 megawatts of renewable wind if it ends up getting constructed. So that's been really rewarding for me.
Yeah, I think for me, any opportunity I get to be on site at a nuclear power plant has been the best. Being able to see the designs on paper and then be able to see them in real life, 3D, that's what they look like. This is how it's operating. Those opportunities have been amazing and make a huge difference in kind of understanding where you fit into the grand scheme of things. Um, when I don't a couple years ago, we were able to finish building Vogtle nuclear power plant, Vogtle units 3 and 4 down in Georgia. And I got to be on site there for a whole year working during the construction phase and doing startup testing and making sure all of the systems were working the way they were supposed to and getting signed off by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Um, so those were some amazing opportunities that I just happened to be hired at the right time because we're being in Charlotte, we're relatively close to that location. Um, and we got to send people down there to live for shorter term assignments. So 100% that was like it definitely jump started my career. Um, but yeah, any chance to be able to see the impact of what you're doing is has been very rewarding. And I feel like I get to inspire other people to join this type of industry too. Every chance I get to do panels like this or like go to career fairs and talk to people about my job, it's like it's like when you like what you do and you're able to share it with other people, it's the best.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that sounds like a great opportunity that you had to kind of be on site, especially when you're early in your career. It's always great to jump in and get that experience and learn from others. I want to add for me as well, just being able to meet landowners and be on site has also been super rewarding, especially, for our projects, knowing the tax revenue that we're going to bring to an area that really doesn't have a lot of jobs, and we're going to bring construction crews in and the restaurants are going to be full, the hotels are going to be full, and we're going to bring tax revenue to local schools, and a lot of these communities are really hurting and they really need that. That's been really rewarding too, just to meet these people, and they're always like super thankful. So it's always great to have landowners and stakeholders that are really supportive.
Well, wonderful. And thank you, Catherine, for the question. Are there any other questions from the guests?
I have a question. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Hmm.
Perfect. Okay. Just curious about how AI has impacted your day-to-day roles just in the industry that you are in, like with energy. I currently work in digital marketing. I've been there for 7 years now, and now it's at a point where if I'm not using AI, I'm doing something wrong. And so I'm kind of curious, like as I'm trying to look into kind of pivoting my career here, is AI something that your people are looking for, and is that something that I should be leaning into heavily looking to pivot here, or just kind of, if there's any way I can ask this question, it's a very loaded question.
Yeah, I mean, our company, nuclear is so like monitored and everything's so specific. So obviously, you'd think that AI it's highly regulated for us and our use during, work things. We have Copilot that we're allowed to use that's, we can run our documents through there, have it summarized for us, that kind of stuff. I would say like it's not always accurate, and especially when it comes to like engineer work and calculations and numbers and all that, we do have to go back and double check. Um, but it is something that we're starting to use more. Within our company, we have two different AI programs that they're developing. And these are supposed to be, the plan is to sell them as a product to utility plants to be able to like streamline certain processes. So that's something that they're developing, definitely in the early works, but as you can tell, I feel like most companies are jumping on the bandwagon of AI, trying to find where they fit in and how they can utilize this new technology. So I mean, it's always good to learn how to use it as a tool and to know how to, make your life easier, but not have it do everything for you because obviously you can't trust it 100%. But I wouldn't say right now yet that it's something that we're like super focused on. It's like one of our side projects for us personally. But
That's a really great question. We are developing our own AI tool right now that we can use. I have not seen it yet. I think it's still in a beta version, but right now we also use Copilot. We're allowed to use ChatGPT if we want, or a few other things, but I think learning how to use AI in the industry is super important, and also learning web scraping. That's something that we've gotten super into. It can be hard when you're Googling or asking AI to, let's say find a location of a certain transmission line or plan transmission infrastructure. So I think also learning web scraping is super, super useful. And I know a lot of companies are kind of using those tactics along with AI to better screen sites.
Thank you.
I had to Google
Well,
what web scraping meant because I've never heard that before.
I had never heard it either. We just started recently doing that. So,
That's cool.
yeah.
well, awesome. If there are no other questions, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us tonight, as well as thank our guests for their insights.
Thank you for
Awesome.
having us.
Thank you so much, Grace and Caitlin. And I want to give a special shout out to Eric, who has been running our career speaker series, what, the past 2 years? I think this might be your last one, Eric, before you
I
graduate.
I was having that realization today, coming back from an appointment, and I was like, "Oh man!" So, thank you. I really appreciate it.
So everybody say thanks to Eric. He's been awesome, and he creates all the questions and does all the facilitation while I try to do my emails in the background at these. So awesome. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Grace and Caitlin. It was so great to have you. I'm just so amazed. Y'all are so like fluent in your industries. I'm just like, wow.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank
thank
you
you for
for
having us.
having
It's been
me.
great.
Yeah, really great to come back, and always love to talk to everyone from my alma mater. So thank you.